at the end of week 1, everyone will be talking about that more this week on the couch. If we're happy, if we're excited, if we're ready to have a good time, we're ready to hang out with Davis Mattek. Davis, who's everyone going to be talking about? What is everyone going to be talking about at the end of week 1?
Jordan Love is going to have thrown 5 touchdowns against the Philadelphia Eagles. That is my official prediction for what everyone is going to be talking about at the end of week 1.
I like it. Well, I mean, we can dig down too, and there's a layer to this of, by the way, there's a game on Friday in Brazil. So put that in your calendar. But also that the Eagles are one of the teams, there's a handful of teams, Davis, where things didn't go well last year, and they said, we're going to fire everyone but the head coach, or we're going to make changes, a lot of changes, but we're not going to change the head coach. And the Eagles are one of those teams. They bring in Vic Fangio, but they're one of those defenses that look good on paper, have a lot of names on paper, but as you're predicting, they can be carved up. At the end of the year, this was a defense that had their tail between their legs. How much of this Jordan Love 5 touchdown take is also a Christian Watson take?
It's actually, if you made me assign the logic, the Eagles defense would be the lowest part of it. Like, I mean, not that I have no opinions on what defenses are good or bad, but I don't have an opinion that the Eagles defense is particularly good or particularly bad. I think it is probably likely to be a unit that has several impact players, but it's not the reason that the Eagles do or do not compete in the NFC. It's mostly a Jordan Love, but also a Josh Jacobs take. It's them looking at their backfield and saying, well, Marshawn Lloyd has a hamstring. We've got a UDFA as our running back 2 who's never really played a high-level football game in his life. I forgot the name of the college that Emmanuel Wilson went to.
Right.
And it's actually, Sig, I learned this about 17 years ago listening to this podcast on the couch and the football and the Audible. The fear of rational coaching, the ploy of falling into rational coaching. I actually think LaFleur is quite a rational coach, and I think he will look at his roster and say, well, I've got this great young quarterback who can't seem to ever miss a throw. What should be the way I set my team up early on in the season or for the entire season? It should be, well, my 5th wide receiver would probably start on the Cowboys, would probably start on the Buccaneers, would probably start on the Eagles, right? Bo Melton. Wicks, Melton, Dobbs, Watson, Reed. That's a great cast of characters. Kraft, a very good second tight end. Luke Musgrave, a very strong rotational tight end. This is a team that is set up to do a Jordan Love MVP season, and I think we get the fireworks against the Eagles.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And you mentioned Musgrave. Tucker Kraft. I love Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft's day will come. Every time I think about him when we're doing a show, the word badass. He's just a total badass when he has the ball in his hands. And I think the Packers know that. And there was this late burst of buzz of people covering the Packers. Wow, Tucker Kraft. And now he's got a back issue. And he's on the injury report. So maybe it's Luke Musgrave. Devin White didn't make the trip to Brazil. Not that Devin White, some people would say he was overrated to begin with, but in the Kobe Dean, I mean, there's some weaknesses. But yeah, I think that the Packers offense is an ascendant unit. And this could be one Jordan Love. There are a lot of different quarterbacks, Davis, that you could say project growth, and they're up there in that top 5. Jordan Love qualifies, but we didn't talk about him a lot. If you take a look at where the arrow was pointing coming out of 2023, it was pointing up for Jordan Love. And that first data point of 2024 could show us that we neglected that because we were too busy worrying about who's going to be the wide receiver to take, or is Josh Jacobs going to be in a committee, which disintegrated right before the season. Sometimes it's luck that puts us in a position to win. And certainly Josh Jacobs.
Well, it's always luck.
Well,
it's always luck that puts us in fantasy football.
That's
totally fantasy football is totally a skill-based game.
Right.
But you could be the best and most skilled fantasy player alive, and without a little bit of luck, you're not going to win. It's just the name of the game, man.
That's the secret, right? It's the big secret, right? If you're patting yourself on the back for taking Josh Jacobs, we'll never know what would have happened if Marshawn Lloyd and A.J. Dillon had stayed healthy. But as you said, and I think you were alluding to this, because there's this sense, well, Matt LaFleur is going to force a committee onto any backfield personnel. But he maybe that's Aaron Jones and Aaron Jones' ability to stay healthy. We're going to see that when Minnesota faces off with the Giants. So it's the big reveal, man. The big reveal. This is the thing. Maybe the least talked about. I talk about it a lot, but overall, Davis, across fantasy football, I think we spend so much time talking about draft strategies. We spend so much time now. People are talking about matchups. Wow, analytics. Wow, putting the game, seeing it through a numbers-based lens to try to find edges, right? But really, I think still the biggest most important fantasy football skill is the reveal in week 1. And we can say, the reveal lasts honestly through week 4, but week 1, week 2 is the biggest part of it. And the ability to sort out signal from noise and act when other people are saying, I want more evidence. Other people are going to say, I want more evidence. I want more evidence. And the people that will prosper will say, I don't need any more evidence. And some of this is just being so steeped in all of the possibilities so that as soon as you start to see the data points, you can plot where the graph is going, right? So when I say the big reveal, because I think the other part about week 1, we can say, well, here's my prediction for week 1, right? But maybe the more important part of week 1 is, here are the things that my mind is open to, and I'm waiting to see what happens. And now I might be ready to act more confidently or do something more unorthodox based on what we believe today. So what's something in week 1, the big reveal, that you're saying, I'm open to changing my mind depending on what happens?
That's a good one. I think one where I feel pretty strongly is that the Denver Broncos backfield should be like this huge plethora of fantasy points. And this might be too best ball brained of me, but I mean, Sig, you've heard all the stats. Sean Payton never been outside the top 5 in receiving points to backs. Russell Wilson, who we all think is beyond cooked, was like, I believe, 9th in the NFL in EPA per play when he got benched last offseason. Like, he's a pretty reasonable, like, Sean Payton is a very good coach. Bo Nix was exactly what we wanted. Bo Nix was exactly who can orchestrate this offense. What I've been saying all offseason is Bo Nix is not a particularly great quarterback, but Bo Nix can mimic 39-year-old Drew Brees very well. If I was going to pick one quarterback in this draft class to watch 39-year-old Drew Brees tape and just be like, well, I can go and do that, it would definitely be one Mr. Bo Nix. And so that is held through in my drafts, right? A lot of Jaleel McLaughlin, a lot of Javonte, a lot of Audric Estime. Estime probably my favorite of the bunch. But if they come out in week 1 against Seattle, and Seattle is just kicking them around, the run game can't get going. It's 3rd and 8 all the time. Devon Vele is playing instead of Franklin and Mims because that's just what Sean Payton wants out there. Then I might be like, well, you know what? Sure, there are going to be 4 games I really wish I had Jaleel at some point this season because it will work out. But for managed leagues, forget about it. Like I would turn on the Broncos pretty quick if the results against Seattle are really bad.
Yeah, I think that just the way you set up this answer, we can then take it almost like Mad Libs and apply it to at least like 8 or 10 offenses, right? Where we're waiting, and oftentimes it hinges on the quarterback, and that's the thing. I think that Denver, just to touch on Denver really quick, and you're right to mention Sean Payton, right? Like anytime we're talking about Denver for fantasy football, the first sentence is Sean Payton. Doesn't even matter who you're talking about. It doesn't even matter. It's Sean Payton going to be successful? It's year 2, right? Year 1, you sort out who belongs with your program and who doesn't. Okay, he had a year to do that. Now it's time to start putting together your program with the players you want. We're going to see that, but you are going up to Seattle, and it is a challenging defense to play. Mike McDonald, he's pretty good at defensive game planning.
Yeah.
You have let's not, because in fantasy football we're so focused on offense. Devin Witherspoon and Reek Woolen, this is fun. I mean, if you're a defensive game planner, when you know that you can compress everything to the middle of the field and closer to the line of scrimmage, it reminds you of the Legion of Boom. I mean, it's like you just put everyone in the middle of the field and it's just like a strike zone. And it isn't like Denver. We'll see. Certainly we saw last year a lot of moves that signified They're going to commit to the run. This is a run-first team. So you're right to focus on the backfield. But is it going to be shades of Kamara and Ingram, or is it going to be, well, you could see they were going for that, but it just ain't going to happen. And like you said, Bo Nix is part of that. I love that you said 39. You qualified it. You said
Yeah, it's
39-year-old
not
Drew
peak
Brees.
Drew Brees. Peak Drew Brees threw a mean deep ball. You
Right.
can close your eyes right now and see in your mind's eye
Mm-hmm.
the Devery Henderson, the Robert
Yes.
Meacham ball. Now that left Drew Brees' locker about age 36.
Right.
And Bo Nix does not have that in his locker, maybe even against air. I don't know. I don't know if Bo Nix does that in camp,
Right.
11-on-0.
Right.
But, people do laugh. I've been making this point on fantasy podcasts all summer, and people laugh. But, like, throwing an accurate screen is a skill. Like, getting it in the breadbasket where the guy is on the move. It is a skill.
Yes.
And, like, some quarterbacks are not very good at it. Some guys don't have the touch. Some guys do it too hard. Some guys float it too much. Bo Nix, if you look at all of his college data, even the Auburn data when he was not playing very good overall, he is like the most deadly accurate short area quarterback in the class. I mean, if you had me like, oh, we have this great screenplay to win a game, I'm having Bo Nix throw that instead of Caleb Williams. Like, it just that is like what he was put on this earth to do. He's very good at it.
It's a really important point, and this is more of like an April conversation when we're talking about the draft, but it's a really important point, and it applies to every position, but it especially applies to quarterback, is, what does this player do well, and what do you ask the quarterback to do? It seems so simplistic, but you watch teams get it wrong, and you would think, like you said, Sean Payton handpicked Bo Nix, and he's going to ask Bo Nix to do things he does well. And you're right, there's a thing, I call it hyper accuracy. Tom Brady had it. Matt Ryan had it, where it's not just, is the ball complete for completion? Was it thrown for completion? But are you setting up the player? It's vectors, right? So that they can just kind of run through the ball, so that they are able to track the ball, and it doesn't cause them to have to break stride or adjust their body to make the catch. This is an underrated skill in football. And certainly it is one, like you said, that Bo Nix has demonstrated. So really quick, I just want to hit on this because there's a bunch of offenses that I think, and you can just give me, like, we're doing a little like speed round, right? And just tell me what you think when I say this, right? Where I think there are offenses that we're going to watch the quarterback in week 1 and say, okay, now we have a pretty good idea of at least which end of the range of possibilities we should be looking at. So let's start with Indianapolis going up against Houston. Anthony Richardson, 17 starts since high school.
I mean, I just would like for Anthony Richardson to get through a game without going to the medical tent and completing some passes that are totally in rhythm in the scheme of the offense, not scrambles, not here, just like some normal 11-yard intermediate throws on 2nd and 7. Also, the number one thing I'm looking at is, like, I'm going to determine if Shane Steichen is fake sharp or actually sharp, is how is A.D. Mitchell deployed. If Mitchell is deployed only on the outside, because that's mostly what he did at Texas, with like Pittman in the slot or kicking Alec Pearson there sometimes, that is a down vote. I'm going to be like, shit, Shane, you're not the man that I thought you were. Now, that my level of worry there is very low. But yeah, I just want to see Richardson make some nice professional quarterback throws. That's really all I'm looking to see from him.
Yeah, but you set it up well where you say, I mean, if we don't see that, because Houston Texans, their defense, they got Danielle Hunter this offseason. So Danielle Hunter, second year Will Anderson, that could be one of the stories. Going back to the top of the show, that could be
they're all in this year.
Yes, so we don't have to say the Texans pass offense, because I mean that's an exciting review, and that's something that could either side of the ball for the Texans. All right, and then let's stay in the division. Will Levis, Tennessee, traveling to Chicago.
Well, this is one where the coaches said one thing all offseason. Offense coordinator, head coach, we're going to throw more. We're going to see what Will has. We're going to rotate these running backs. We're going to use DeAndre Hopkins. We're going to use Calvin Ridley. We're going to push the ball deep. We're going to not run on 1st and 10, and then the rubber is going to meet the road. And if they show that to me, if the Bears defense is much better.
Yes.
Than it should be like one of the 6 or 7 best defenses in the NFL. Again, I mean, just based off what I read, I couldn't go too deep in the weeds on that. But if they go into this pretty difficult spot, Soldier Field, and they're just like, you know what, Will Levis is going to throw the ball 37 times, Spears and Pollard are really going to rotate. They're mostly going to function as kind of extensions of the offense, not the offense itself. I'm going to believe them. Now, on the converse, if Will Levis throws 4 picks, Tony Pollard has 18 rushes, Spears has 10, and it's just like this brutal slog, I'm also going to believe that. It's not going to be a spot where I'm going to be like, well, you know, it's a tough road spot. Like, I'm not going to give very much benefit of the doubt, because I think your week 1 game plan should say a lot about how you envisioned yourself as a team over the course of the offseason.
Yeah, that's such a great point. You know, I don't think I really truly consider that, Davis, until you said it. But it's a terrific week 1 talking point on the couch, right? Is it your week 1 game plan is a bit of a Rorschach ink blot test, where it's like you've seen these guys, you had them at camp, you've watched them in the preseason, joint practices, etc. Like you said, it's what are you envisioning? Now, how does it go? We'll see. And like you said, the defense, the opponent is part of that equation. And we're always recontextualizing. Always. What we see in week 1, after week 1, we'll think, well, it may have meant this. But then what we see in week 2, we'll go back and say, well, actually it meant this, right? Does it mean that Will Levis in this offense isn't going to be as good as we thought? Or does it mean, like you said, the Bears defense is really good, and anybody who comes up with a game plan that puts the Bears on their heels at all, well, that's going to be a really good offense. It doesn't mean that the Titans are a terrible offense if they look terrible against the Bears, but it might. I mean, it could be both. But I agree. I think the offensive line is going to be massively improved, but I'm not sure about Will Levis. And I actually think deep super flex. I actually think Mason Rudolph is actually one of the quarterbacks we don't talk about as someone who could see playing time without an injury to the starter. You know, at some point.
Number 1 on that list got to be Nick Mullins, right? Deep super flex guy who's not owned in your your 14 team one.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. And Sam Darnold, I mean, you basically just did the take right there. Sam Darnold is yet another quarterback that we're going to watch in week 1 and say, okay, now
Sam Darnold is going to have 300 yards and like 3 touchdowns. And I've never been so convinced that a guy is going to come out and look good than in this matchup against the Giants. I think he's going to crush right away.
Okay, let's unpack that, because I mean, I tend to agree that you should be on the optimistic side. I mean, this is a Giants defense. They got Brian Burns. This got Shane, but we talked about Tennessee. Tennessee's defense isn't one we feared. That's who the Giants hired. And the Giants are another one of those teams that basically fired everybody. Or, I mean, they didn't fire Mike Kafka, but Brian Dable's going to do the play calling now. And they basically said all the problems last year, well, it's not on Brian Dable, not on Daniel Jones. That's the other side of this. I don't think we have to say we're waiting to see how Daniel Jones is going to play, but maybe he'll surprise us. Maybe Brian Flores' defense will knock him out in the game in week 1, and we'll see Drew Lock right away. But you're very confident that Sam Darnold's going to look good against this Giants defense. Tell us more.
I mean, I'm honestly just pretty confident that Sam Darnold is going to look good for like most of the year. It'll just be a matter of how much is KOC able to pull back his interceptions, because that was what was driving KOC crazy about Mullins. Remember, he benched Mullins for Jaron Hall, and then it was like, this is not working. We got to go back. Mullins turns the ball over a bit too much, but I mean, Darnold. I was talking about this earlier on my podcast. I had Coach Drew Lieberman, who's like a private personal trainer, who's worked out with like Brandon Ayuk and Evan Ingram and these guys. And I asked him about Darnold, and he's like, you know, a lot of guys in the NFL, the first time they ever face any adversity is in the NFL, because they were the best guy in high school. They were the best guy in college. Their coaches loved them. You know, everyone loved them. All they did was win. Well, Sam Darnold is like, he was the number 1 or the number 2 high school prospect. He goes to USC. He's awesome there. He plays great. I don't remember how well they did in the playoffs or anything, but I'm sure they won a bunch of games. He gets to the Jets, and it's like, go look at the coaches that Sam Darnold's had. Go look at the wide receivers. Do you know this off the top of your head? The number 1 wide receiver that Sam Darnold has thrown to in his career, the only guy over 100 receptions from Sam Darnold.
Oh my gosh. No.
It's Robbie Anderson.
Oh, Robbie Chosen.
Robbie Chosen and Jamison Crowder are the only 2 wide receivers to have ever gotten over 100 targets from Sam Darnold. So basically, I think Darnold probably has the innate ability. I think his processing speed is like a second too slow to be a really good NFL quarterback. But if you're asking me, can the Vikings win 9 games, and the Vikings led the NFL in passing yards as a team last year, can they do something like that again? I'm like, Yeah, the answer to that is pretty clearly yes to me, I think.
Yeah, this Giants secondary, Giants defense, one of the biggest additions for the Packers, who we've already talked about, was the Xavier McKinney. The Giants, for whatever reason, decided they didn't see him as part of their core. Yeah, I think you're right to point out Minnesota and Sam Darnold as a potential success story that we're talking about. I always come back to how San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan, lots of chatter for years that he was really fascinated with Sam Darnold. And then he brought him in last year. I only got to see him for one game. But that is a coach who needs his quarterback to operate in structure, as Kevin O'Connell does. And we'll see. Okay, total change of tone when we bring up this next offense and the next quarterback reveal. Deshaun Watson and Cleveland facing the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be bad. I think he's going to play bad. His shoulder, it's like, it's past the Deshaun Watson is not a very nice guy stuff to like, Deshaun Watson hasn't played good football since 2020. He's got this chronic shoulder injury. It seems like maybe he doesn't really want to play. I mean, it's hard to read into the mind of someone you've never met, but it seems like he's not that interested in playing football. And it's like, okay, they trade for Judy. It's going to be this like spread, no Chubb. It's going to be this spread passing attack. It's going to look more West Coast. It's going to be more pass heavy. And I just like, I don't know. I guess if they show it to me in week 1, if Deshaun Watson looks good and the shoulder's good and he throws for 312 yards and no picks, I would actually, that would be one of the higher signal results from week 1 for me. Actually, would be Watson looking confident and healthy and like delivering. I mean, I'm sure Amari Cooper would love to have a great game here, like, but to me, that's like one of the results I feel is less likely from week 1. And Sig, I don't like Deshaun Watson as a person, but my thing is like the NFL just needs more good quarterbacks. Imagine how fun fantasy football would be if all 32 teams had someone as good as Pat. That'd be the most fun game in the world.
Right. Maybe the NFL can switch to all-time quarterback. We did it when we were kids, right? It's just Patrick Mahomes, all-time quarterback. Or in every game, the better quarterback just gets to be the quarterback for both teams. Let's see what happens. Just let them have a little bit of longer commercial breaks or something between drives. No, but just with Deshaun Watson, like you said, I think you mentioned the physical, you alluded to the mental, spiritual, emotional side. And I think that this stuff absolutely belongs in football analysis discussions, that he's just not the same person. He's just, something happened. Everything that happened when he was away from football and dealing with all of his legal issues, something in his aura changed, and it changed on the football field also. He looked affirmatively terrible, and then he looked kind of feeble, basically. That's what we've seen since he's been back. And then they go and sign Jameis Winston. So, yeah, that could be something that is set in motion based on, the possibilities start to open up now. Remember, it was Joe Flacco who was the story of this offense last year. And again, you go back and look in fantasy terms. If Anthony Richardson gets hurt, remember, Joe Flacco's a Colt now, by the way. But Joe Flacco was a tremendous fantasy quarterback last year. If you do the sort by points per game.
I started him, Sig, I'm in a 16-team, 28-man dynasty league with my dad and his friends. Been in it for 15 years. And Joe Flacco was my quarterback of a championship team last year because Kirk Cousins hurt his Achilles, so I was starting Joe Flacco.
Fantasy football, right? It's just like the NFL in so much as just try to get to the playoffs and hang around so that you have a chance to be the one that benefits from that good luck. Or although we know Davis Mattek always has foresight. What's your foresight tell you? This is maybe the classic one where we say, you know what? If it's bad in week 1, let's just turn the page and say, okay, let's see what happens in week 2 with Jaden Daniels and Washington as they're going down to Tampa Bay.
I would love for Jaden Daniels to come in just like deep bomb. McLaurin's running free. Luke McCaffrey's like wiggling around in a slot. Zach Ertz is his, kind of his Gandalf the Grey, shepherding him up and down the field. I fear with Jaden Daniels, he's going to get sacked a lot more than he did in college. Because he actually was pretty good at sack avoidance in college. I fear he invites contact so much as a rusher. It's like, Sig, I don't know. I guess we are of different generations, so maybe you never had this experience, but I watched a lot of college football growing up, played a lot of college football, loved college football. My dad probably likes the Oklahoma Sooners more than he liked the Cowboys. And so I just asked my dad one day, I was like, why does no team run the option in the NFL the way college team? Why does no team run the triple option? It seems unbeatable to me. There's 3 ways you can go on every play. And my dad explained it to me. Well, basically, NFL defenders are so big, strong, and fast that they can close down 2 of the options at the same time that a college player really can't. And I feel like we're going to see a lot of that with Jaden Daniels as a rookie, of being like, well, this angle I would have taken to beat Chattanooga A&M's defensive end to get this throw off to Brian Thomas, I actually can't do that against Micah Parsons.
Miles
That doesn't
Garrett,
work because that guy closes down the space. Now, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be a good NFL quarterback, but I think and I don't know, I don't love the marriage between him and Cliff. Actually,
exactly.
Because I watched. I mean, you want to talk about someone who's very near and dear to my heart, Kyler Murray. Kyler and Cliff was a bad marriage. Cliff didn't have the tools in his toolbox to build on Kyler, and Kyler wasn't a great fit for what Cliff wanted to do either. So maybe Cliff, Cliff did a journey of self-discovery. He went to Thailand and took some ayahuasca or whatever. So maybe this time will be different. But I'm not super optimistic for year one passing. I mean, I think Daniel's going to be an incredible rusher for sure.
And Todd Bowles, that's the thing. Todd Bowles is going to sweep the leg in week 1. Todd Bowles is going to say, "Okay, rookie, let's see how you handle this stuff." He's not going to be afraid of Jaden Daniels. Maybe Jaden Daniels can do some things to force, the week 2, week 3, week 4 defensive coordinator to say, "Oh, we do need to be afraid of him." Cliff Kingsbury is the main guy in that, though, more than Daniels, honestly. Like you said, Davis, I'm interested to see what Cliff does, because I'm not convinced that Cliff Kingsbury is a net positive for his quarterbacks. I was doing a show yesterday with Big Doug. I love Big Doug. And he said, why did the draft community, why did they not so much miss on Patrick Mahomes, but why was there disagreement about Patrick Mahomes? I think Cliff Kingsbury is part of that story, really.
Well, I actually want to give the draft community a pass. It's because I'm not giving them a pass, but the type of things Mahomes did in college, you would have to be so absurdly good in the NFL to get away. Like Pat's footwork is not perfect. It's like he's not an Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence style quarterback, can't miss prospect, right? Like, true. I actually do think that if Pat would have went to almost any other team, he'd have been good. He'd have been good. No doubt he would have been good, but he would not have been this. He would not have been. There's something about how Andy coached him up that just lets him play.
Right.
I mean, I think that he plays so free, I think really is what it is. Like watching Pat play quarterback is kind of like watching Miles Davis play the sax or something. Like it's just, it's free form,
Yeah. Well, and the quarterback comes to mind is Aaron Rodgers, right? Because I think we saw, especially in the you said Matt LaFleur's a rational quarterback, but it seemed like there was discord, if we're going to go musical, not harmony with Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur, because Aaron Rodgers is not a player that's going to stay within structure. Maybe Jordan Love is. And that freedom, that little bit of freedom to engage the defense the way you want to engage the defense, like you're right, that's the secret sauce. It's the complete freedom that Patrick Mahomes has. And it's fun. And Caleb Williams is the next quarterback in that paradigm, in that archetype. So excitement. These are all these things that get us excited, because I'll take a step back and say again, because we've talked about David Foster Wallace, we've talked about Infinite Jest, right? I think now the great American novel is the NFL. It's just happening in real time, and we're getting to like flip through the pages of it, right? All of the epic stories of America all intersect on the NFL field. So best and worst and everything in between all intersects. And it is one of incredible emotion, sacrifice, suffering, elation, everything. It's Dickens, it's Shakespeare, what we get to watch when you understand the stories, when you understand the backgrounds, and you understand the significance each new iteration adds. And I think that Patrick Mahomes is Andy Reid. These are terrific examples of players, coaches, you could look at different points in their arc and say, wow, who would have predicted this is where they would have ended up if you would have looked at them at this point? But that's the thing about the NFL is it's all very mercurial, but we get our first hint, at least, of the first 4-8 weeks of the season, and for fantasy football, how we're going to try to harness this. Is there any other quarterbacks? I mean, I guess, have we talked about Caleb? Have we given Caleb his due? We talked about Will Levis. So 2 teams.
I don't know if we have given Caleb
Yeah.
his due, honestly. Like, I could see Caleb as soon as like 2 seasons from now, maybe even next season, being like, well, he's better than Josh Allen, right? I mean, the final season at USC where his teammates just decided to stop tackling everyone, like, kind of stopped what Caleb could have had, like, almost an all-time college career, really. He the way I've been explaining it to people, I don't know if are you watching college football right now? Do you know
A
about
little
this
bit.
Dylan?
Go
Do
ahead.
you know about this Dylan Raiola kid?
Go on. Educate me.
So he was 12 years old when Pat got drafted. So he wears the wristband like Mahomes does. He wears the headband like Mahomes does. But if you think about it, Caleb is the first quote unquote generational quarterback prospect whose whole high school, college thing happened while Mahomes was the best quarterback in the NFL.
Right.
And that necessitates you being a difference that he's not going to succeed the same way Trevor Lawrence can succeed. Like, Caleb is going to do more funky stuff. He's going to roll to his left and throw off his back foot. He's going to avoid sacks. He's going to spin around in circles. Because the archetype for guys the last 20 years was, well, if you're a statue, you're Brady. If you can move a little bit, you're Rodgers. And if you can move a lot, I guess like a combo of McNabb, Vic would have been kind of what you would have built your game off of. And now it's all different because everyone wants to be Pat. You want to run your Pat. Everyone just wants to be him. And Caleb is going to be a fascinating test case of, well, what happens when a guy who 10 years ago would have tried to be Tom Brady tries to be Mahomes? It's just fascinating.
It is fascinating. You know, as you're saying that, Davis, what I'm thinking is you're seeing it. The pendulum really has swung all the way to the other side. You talked about the option in college football, and you're talking about the archetype of quarterbacks, young quarterbacks are coming into the league now. And you wonder, like, are the Peyton Mannings and Carson Palmers out there, are they even being made into quarterbacks? Or are they even getting a chance? Because who has an offense and a system at the lower levels of football that is based on a statue pocket passer? You're basically taking away a whole section of the playbook if that's what you have. It better be some really gifted pocket passer.
Well, this is like the Jared Goff thing. It's like, so the Lions are so, they love to go for it on 4th down. It's like their whole ethos. But going for it on 4th down goes a lot better when your quarterback can just go and get 4 yards sometimes when it breaks down. It's like that's kind of the secret about the Lions, is that, well, Goff is just not going to be able to roll out and go get a 1st down on 4th and 3 sometimes.
And the plays that Brock Purdy made that broke the Lions back in the NFC title game were not plays with instructor Kyle Shanahan, and he meshed so well. It was Purdy as a scrambler. And he did have some measurables, physical measurables that showed, I think, like short area quickness and things like that, that he did have some tools that he could harness. And when you look at the 6 quarterbacks who went in the top 12 this year, Davis, they're all good athletes. They're all athletes. None of them are none of them are Drew Brees. None of them are Jared Goff. They're all very athletic, very mobile guys, and it's something to consider. But I agree about Caleb Williams, and he could be on the fast track, just like CJ Stroud. We're including him in conversations that nobody expected him to be in. And I think if we draw the connection between Mahomes and Caleb, and I think you saw this just a little bit in the preseason, is the game just happens slower for him. That's why he feels free to do all that stuff.
That's so true. It's like when he's playing quarterback, you kind of watch him move, and it's like he's moving slower, and the defenders are zooming around him, and he's kind of just like, well, let me go here. Oh, it's not going to work. All right, let's go. It's like you can see. It's so funny to compare him to the guy he's taking over from. Where it's like with Fields, I'm like, well, Fields, you could beat everyone to the end zone in a foot race,
right?
But they're confused. Like, you were just so confused, just like watching Fields play quarterback. You're like, well, he's just confused. He's got Fields probably has better physical tools than Caleb.
Oh,
He's probably
sure.
a more accurate, harder thrower of the ball, but he's just not quite there mentally.
Right. It's all about consciousness and perception. That's the thing. And you can see it, even you brought up Josh Allen. You can see the difference between Josh Allen when he's a rushed thinker, when his emotional brain is maybe influencing too much his perceptions, and when he's calm. And I think that Justin Fields is another good example, too, of what I always describe as getting valid instructions from the visual information you're processing. That's it. Just as simple as, what do I see and what does it tell me to do? And with Justin Fields, it's that half beat behind. But with Caleb Williams and Patrick Mahomes, it's like the metronome slows down. Boo, boo, boo. And they can find stuff in between the beats. Whereas for other quarterbacks, it's like boom, 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 boom. And they're just trying to not get their head taken off. Or they're just trying to not make a mistake. And they're seeing all kinds of possibilities.
That's so what it is. It's like there's two different types of quarterbacks. There's the quarterbacks who are trying not to make a mistake, and there's a quarterback who's trying to make something happen. Right. And sometimes guys can vacillate between it based on their confidence level. Like Daniel Jones right now, to me, like, you know me, Sig, I love Wan'Dale Robinson, one of my favorite players in the NFL. Like I can't really take him this year. I don't even really like taking Nabers. Like Nabers is this like generational, incredible player. But I'm like, Daniel Jones is trying to sink that whole ship because he was not a particularly gifted quarterback to begin with and is now playing with like sub-zero level confidence.
Right. Confidence is so important. So many stories. We want to look at analytics, yards per route run, or look at measurables, or look at production, or look at all these different things. I don't think there's a way to quantify confidence. And this goes back into Deshaun Watson too, I think. I don't think there's a way you can quantify it, but it often is one of the key elements in the story of why did this guy fail or why did this guy succeed? And it's oftentimes, I always like to say, we're peeking through keyholes. It's oftentimes based on information that we just could never have had access to. And I especially for quarterbacks. And it's so exciting with all these new quarterbacks. It's exciting to be able to watch this stuff and to see where we go. And of course, with our fantasy football, try to look smart and say, I knew that was going to happen before everybody else, even though none of us really know what's going to happen. But I think that we haven't pondered, it was on Christopher Harris' show, and the theme of the show was players who had quiet summers. And I was surprised to think actually Caleb Williams belongs on this list. It wasn't for the number one overall pick, maybe the Bears finally got a quarterback, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There wasn't a ton of buzz. There wasn't a ton of headlines. There wasn't a ton of
even being on Hard Knocks, there still really wasn't much.
Right. Well, maybe that's just how Caleb is orchestrating this. And yeah, he could be speaking about the great American novel, Davis, enter Caleb Williams and the character that he is. And as you said, the first generational quarterback in this new era. He's the first Zoomer quarterback, I think. He's the first quarterback who came up in NIL times when he was in charge of his destiny from day one. He didn't have to say yes, sir, no, sir to anybody, really. And I think that turned off some people in the NFL. Some of the stuff that
turned off a lot of people in the NFL. Remember, there were crazy rumors going out about him before the beginning of the draft, which is like, I don't know. To me, obviously, I'm a little biased towards him because he also went to the University of Oklahoma. So, he did leave, and Lincoln Riley is the turncoat. But I actually don't hold that against him at all. No. So I got to watch his first ever career game. It's the Red River rivalry. Spencer Rattler is supposed to be the first overall pick. He's like terrible in every game. Finally, Lincoln Riley's just like, dude, I've seen enough. We're losing the Red River rivalry. Caleb, you got to come in. And he's nails. 18 years old, just like no fear. I believe he scored a 45-yard rushing touchdown in that game. Honestly, I don't even remember if they won or lost. I think they lost, but I don't even remember. Mm-hmm. But he was and just ever since then, I've been like that guy. You don't lose that. You don't lose that. Whatever it is about Caleb Williams, he's just got it.
Yeah, I think that he made people uncomfortable. All those different rumors, all the things you're talking about, I just read all that is somebody was made uncomfortable by Caleb Williams. And
for sure,
you know who he makes comfortable? His teammates.
His teammates love him.
His teammates love him, and I'm super excited to see what is coming next for the Bears. And with Nabers, you mentioned Nabers really quick, and you mentioned Daniel Jones, and we'll see. What's fascinating there is at least we've heard the statement of purpose that he is the foundational player in the offense. Not like we're hearing we didn't hear that now with Arizona. Kyler Murray's the foundational player in that offense. Malik Nabers is the foundational. For fantasy, that could be great, or it could be like Garrett Wilson with a host of quarterbacks. That's something exciting to see too. Is Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers and what that could be. That we could. Davis, it wouldn't surprise me at all by like week 3, assuming Aaron Rodgers stays healthy. And that same Deshaun Watson topic about the spiritual, mental side of quarterback, did something happen with Aaron Rodgers that he's just not going to be the same? I don't know. But if he's even 70%, 60%, 50%, let's remember Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest to ever play. So if he's like 50%.
Well, remember, Rodgers has been one of the greatest to ever play, and he's also just been all right. He had that dip. He had that dip where he was just okay. I mean, he definitely was not bad. It's that Rodgers plays this very particular brand, this very particular style, and that style actually went out of vogue, but now it's back in vogue.
Yes.
So his style of like never throw an interception, never take a sack. Under no circumstances do you ever take a sack or do you ever throw an interception. Throw the ball away, do whatever you have to do to avoid those two things. That went out of vogue, and now that's how everyone plays. That's how quarterbacks will do anything to avoid throwing a pick or avoid taking a sack. So I anticipate if he's healthy, the Jets getting pretty good results on offense. The thing that could muddy it for fantasy, well, there are two things. The first being they're going to play so slow. They're going to play so freaking slow. Rodgers going to be to double zeros every time. Mm-hmm. The defense is really good. So those two things set up for a lot of 21-10 games. The other thing is, I'm wondering your opinion on this. Mm-hmm. I think Braylon Allen is actually so good that you can't just not play him at all. That you wanted to be like, well, we got to just get this guy 8 rushes a game somehow, and some near the goal line. Although Rodgers is probably vain enough to be like, buddy, this is like my retirement year. I'm throwing 40 touchdowns. We're not bringing in this 19-year-old to score my touchdowns.
Right. It's possible. I mean, I agree with you that Braylon Allen is a player we need to watch as more than a mere, not even backup, because like you said, it's Breece Hall. It's Breece Hall, and you expect him to get 85, 99. I mean, when we next to Christian McCaffrey, he was drafted right after Christian McCaffrey, right? I mean, this is part of the story is Breece Hall should be number 2 in snap share among running backs in the NFL, but Braylon Allen could come in and say, well, no, because he was a story of training camp. Many of the early reports, a lot of the beat writers were really fixated on saying, wow, this Braylon Allen. And the thing was, Braylon Allen had all of the physical tools and had really early, you mentioned 19-year-old, really early on in his college career, he looked like he might be the next big thing. Then it didn't come together, but the physical tools were there, and maybe something got in alignment. So the Jets, maybe we're a little sleeping on the Jets as, again, the growth offense. Because there's one thing to say, can you identify which offenses are going to be the best offenses? That's important in fantasy football. But are you identifying the offenses that improve the most compared to expectations? That's the thing. I think the Jets are one that I didn't, and I know that Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall were both first-round picks. So I don't even know where there was actionable information. Mike Williams was falling too far. I don't even know. But I do know that I don't think people reckoned with, well, what would the Jets offense look like? Like you said, if Aaron Rodgers can play his style of football, and how much was the quarterback play holding back that offense? This is another one I think that's in contention. And you already mentioned Kyler Murray. He's your guy. But is that potentially the story after week 1? Is, remember, Kyler Murray was going to be one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the NFL? Well, he's back.
I'll give you a take. I think the Buffalo Bills lose outright at home to the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah. I think the Cardinals, we go back, we do the ad hoc, not the ad hoc, the post facto examination. We're like, oh, actually the Cardinals were just like the 4th best team in the NFL the whole time. Like Kyler finally gets 2 really, really strong pass catchers, and then the 2 complimentary guys, Michael Wilson and Dortch. Like, actually turns out Kyler was just that good the whole time, and he got some competent coaching and a strong offense or a better offensive line. Right. And he just like runs for 40 yards a game and never gets sacked. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who never gets sacked. You know how hard it is to catch that guy? He is so slippery back there. He is Yeah, I think that is like I again, I don't remember what show I was on, but I said, the Cardinals could win the NFC West, and no one would pick it. Probably most people would pick them to be fourth in that division.
Sure.
Actually, I would guess, but I think that is very real in the range of outcomes for them.
And I brought up that in league circles, Drew Petzing is thought of not that dissimilar from the way Ben Johnson was thought of a year ago. Like a year from now, or at the end of the season, that could be a guy a lot of people are going after to be their next head coach. That could be the coveted guy. And Kyler Murray could be part of the reason why. A healthy Kyler Murray, like you said, better pass catchers, and a team. Again, who knows if Cliff Kingsbury was actually holding back Kyler Murray and the Cardinals coming out of that Steve Keim era. You look back on some of the decisions, some of the first round picks, some of the ways that team is going. So yeah, Arizona, maybe it is, even though it's fall, football is the sport of fall. It could be springtime for Kyler Murray, for that team. And you're right. And it would immediately flip the narrative and say, well, if Buffalo can't beat Arizona at home, why were we thinking that this might be the year they get over the hump? And again, the Texans may say, no, maybe it's our turn. But it's just week one, and there'll be so many different things. We go off the rails a little bit early because I know you did something really cool, Davis. And what I love about this is, I think about the Grateful Dead. I know you and I talked about the Grateful Dead on one of the shows we did recently, right? A U.S.
It's funny. I'm
Blues.
I'm wearing the Nirvana shirt, and Kurt hated them, but I
Yeah, but
love
he
them,
liked
and
the
I love
Beatles, but he loved the Beatles. He
he loved the Beatles.
loved the
He loved the
Beatles.
Beatles. Yeah.
So, that we could get a lot of good Kurt Cobain discussion. That's the whole thing. But I think about the Grateful Dead. I'm thinking about the Grateful Dead because I really do think if someone said, what is the most American rock and roll band? I feel like just
It's not even
immediately,
close. It's not
I
even
think
close. It's
it's
definitely the Grateful Dead.
it's definitely the Grateful Dead. And the Grateful Dead harken back to all kinds of things in the American psyche, in the massed American psyche, right? The West, riding the rails, all kinds of different stuff, especially the first set Grateful Dead tunes. All about America and the psyche of America. And Davis, I feel like you reached back to the great self-promotion genes, the traveling shows, the road shows, to come and see the show. When you did, I think, the most creative promotion in fantasy football this year, you basically said to people like, hey, however I do, that's how you're going to do. I just want you to tell people about what you did this offseason.
Okay, so this offseason, I started a YouTube channel, and I'm drafting all these fantasy football teams on the stream. And I was like, well, okay, my friend Peter Overzet did this great giveaway last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago, where basically he did this big raffle. Anyone who commented on one of Peter's YouTube videos got entered into a raffle to win $1,500. And I was like, well, that's a good idea, but I'd like to put my own flavor on that. How can I get people more jazzed up, more invested in the videos? And I was like, well, great idea would be, what if I just give away a percentage of my winnings? So then we're all invested in the same thing. We're all rooting for the same teams. So the idea, it's actually very simple. One of my friends in Discord was like, oh, we could set this up. So we're going to do, on December 11th, we're going to draw. That's right before the fantasy football playoffs start on Underdog. We are going to do a drawing with all my teams about to advance. And whoever wins is going to be drawing live there with me to win 5% of whatever I win in Best Ball Mania 5. So if I win $1.5 million first place, that means I'm sending out whatever $75,000 post gross tax after that, whatever, which would be, trust me, that would be a very fun bank wire to send, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That would be it would be so wonderful. You probably want to go meet that person in person and say, with the big check and everything, the Gold Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yeah, we got to do a big check. If it comes to pass, we definitely have to do the big check.
It's fun though. It's fun, and it always brings back around to why this is such an exciting time. Right before week one, max anticipation it's not just anticipation of all these reveals and stories and were we right or were we wrong or what should we do to take advantage of it in fantasy football. It's the shared experience. This is one of the last shared experiences. I know
It's
you said
true.
we're
Well,
from
live sports
yeah,
are really one of the last shared experiences, because we don't even have monoculture with TV anymore.
no, or with shared facts about what exactly is happening around us, but certainly the score of a football game is a shared fact, and
Yeah.
what happened in the football game. So wow, there's so many different directions I feel like we could go. We always cover a lot of ground. This is where I think the actual show we would want to do is, I guess, let me just ask you this before we totally turn the page, because I feel like speaking about monoculture, I said this a lot while I was watching the Olympics. I mean, as a kid growing up in the 80s, the 1984 LA Olympics, uh, it was totally captivating collective experience. I mean, I don't know if folks understand now, like the stature and the importance of somebody like Carl Lewis.
Right. No, they
How
definitely don't.
how I mean, anytime the name Jesse Owens was brought up as a comparison, or even just the athletics, I was reminiscing about how the long jump. I don't know how much people are into track and field, but there was this amazing epic long jump in the 1968 Olympics. Bob Beamon, I think he broke the world record by like 2 feet or something like that. And then it was finally broken, and Carl Lewis broke it, but it was wind aided on the jump before. It was like in 1989, I want to say, like in the late 80s at the World Track and Field Championships, and it was Michael Powell who did it. And I went back and watched it and just relived it because it was the kind of thing I think was on in the middle of the night because of where it was. But track and field was big enough then that you stayed up late so you could actually watch it. Like the word got out that it was happening. Like, I want to see what this looks like. And still to this day, that record was never broken. So I guess I'll ask first, did you watch the Olympics? Do you care right now?
So I did watch some, not as much as I normally would have, just because of the time stuff. Like now I'm actually well used to watching sports in the middle of the day because I'm a big soccer guy, and those games are on like literally like at, I mean, sometimes 8 a.m, but a lot of times at like noon and stuff here. So I'm pretty used to it. I watched the men's basketball. My wife really likes the swimming, so I watched a bunch of that. Watch the skateboarding, which is just, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of a carnival act that is to me, that is even in the Olympics. But I thought it was, yeah, I enjoyed it, but I had the same sort of ringing hollow feeling that I have with many things like that. I was like, wow, I remember when I was like 8, this would have been the end all be all. I would have watched this for 4 hours straight with my family. Everyone would have talked about it at school the next day. We all would have been locked in. And now it's just like one other thing. It's just another thing I've got going on. It's not the thing.
I hear you. Well, you talk about the pool, because my wife was also a competitive swimmer, and we watch everything in the pool. We watched all of the swimming. And did you get to watch any Leon Marchand?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Breathtaking. Folks, if you don't care about, just go check out Leon Marchand. And what's interesting is he had Michael Phelps coach. And by the way, as an aside, I think it's so fascinating that Michael Phelps world records are all broken already. Like, I think there's a technology. So in track and field, the great records still stand, with the exception of like a 100-meter dash. And there's a few people out there that continue, like the pole vault guy is fun to watch. He breaks the world record like every 2 weeks. But in swimming, it's not even a thing.
It's something going on with swimming, and they get too many medals too. That's a complaint. They get too many medals. They basically get medals for doing the same stroke over different distances.
True.
So like you start to read these lists of like all-time greatest athletes or whatever, and the swimmers will always be in the top 10. And you're like, dude, none of Michael Phelps's records even stand anymore. He's one of the 10 greatest athletes of all time. I don't think so.
Well, and going back to Marchand, who in the story is great because he actually like wrote the coach. I can't remember the coach's name, Bowman, I want to say. They actually wrote him and said, "Hey, I'm this 18-year-old swimmer in France, and I would like for you to coach me." And it's funny too because a lot of the most successful swimmers, I guess he must be coaching a lot of different swimmers. And one of the things he said is, Michael Phelps loved to be yelled at, and that's what worked for him, and not Marchand. What's interesting about Marchand, is watching him. Davis, it's almost like he's the platonic ideal of the stroke. That's how he's great. He's not great because I think Michael Phelps has like this amazing wingspan and something about the way his body can absorb oxygen and all these different physiological advantages. And there is one, they said that Marchand's spine can do things that they haven't seen a swimmer be able to do. Right.
Wow.
And maybe that's part of how he can make these platonic, because he's not a big Hulk. He's not a imposing looking figure. He's a pretty average looking guy in terms of his build. But once he gets in the water, his body, like I said, it just feels like it's the platonic ideal, because he won the IMs, the individual medleys, where you have to do all 4 strokes, right? Isn't that the measure of who's the best swimmer? Because you have to do all 4 strokes in a race. But what also he did was, I'm gonna get chills just thinking about this. Because the other thing was, if you were watching this, it was France, and this was like France's big. I think if you were there in France, he was the star of the Olympics, and there wasn't second place. I mean, he was the rock star of the Olympics, and there was one night that he did, like, I think it was the 200-meter breaststroke and the 200-meter butterfly on the same night. Which I think folks would say, like, when you do a competitive 200-meter race, you're done for that night. And they said, "You want to try?" And he said, "Well, I think I can finish both races." Well, I think I don't make it mixed up whether it's the breaststroke or butterfly. One of them, he was the best, and it was the one that was second, and he won pretty easily. But the first one, I think, was a Hungarian swimmer that is just the man. And in the final 50 meters, that Hungarian swimmer was a good body length ahead of him. And the place was the where they had the swimming, it was rocking. I think it was like where Taylor Swift and a bunch of other stuff happened. It was rocking, and it was like the crowd willed him to the gold medal. I mean, I almost get choked up thinking about it because he popped up from winning. He seemed as shocked as everybody else. What just happened? I encourage folks, if you like transcendental moments, if you like watching something that like reaches out through the screen to you and says something human just happened. It wasn't just numbers. It wasn't just analytics. It wasn't just something that is linear. It's some way, and this is why, like that's one of those things I think that you can say, Davis, and people don't appreciate this. Fans attending sporting events can influence the outcome of the event.
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah, that is 100% true. There's no way. In fact, there's been several studies of home field advantage in sports, and they find that a huge chunk of home field advantage comes from favorable refereeing calls.
Yes, it influences the ref. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, speaking as someone who roots for the Chiefs, I can tell you that's 100% true. That is a miserable place. It's a miserable place to be in, Arrowhead, if you were not a Chiefs fan. I cannot imagine. Every once in a while, I'll see a Bengals fan or a Bills fan will go, and I'm like, I don't know what you were doing, because that is not going to be a fun place for you to leave, like win or lose.
No, but it was really amazing to watch, because I think if you go back and watch that race and you watch the last 50 meters, the crowd won the race. And Marshawn was like the vessel, basically. And for him to win 2 golds in those races, it's kind of like Shohei pitching and hitting, like, throwing hitting a home run and throwing like 7-inning 2-hit ball in the same game. Like, it's just something that people didn't really imagine that was possible before it happened. And it was just tremendous to see that. And there were so many other wonderful there was a lot of great stuff in track, where you saw there was the thing was the 400-meter Quincy Hall, was just determination. It was just pure determination. I think he ran what I love seeing in track especially are the people who run the fastest they've ever run in their life. That race, you save your best race. And then it can only happen in the Olympics. It can only happen if there's only one race every 4 years and the whole world's watching, and everything you do is defined. And that's how you transcend yourself. It's why we love the NFL. It sets players up to transcend themselves every week. But also, we see the agony of defeat, and we get a tiny, tiny, tiny little taste of that, like homeopathy, like one little molecule of it in our fantasy teams, right? I have this thing here. I want to do a shout out. It's a note here, if you're watching live, says, "We wish you good fortune in the wars to come, Team Ocelot." This is a brewery. They sent wonderful people. So, like Davis, our fans aren't the fans. We shouldn't even have fans, first of all.
Right.
But the people that help us be able to do this, they're too nice. You're all too nice. And Ocelot's a brewery, like the Northern Virginia, DC area. They this one wearing their shirt right now. And it's so awesome to just make good friends and spend good times together and just sit back and watch things happen and think, wow, that happened. And we were alive to see it. And what a thing that is in and of itself. Davis, just like getting to hang out with you, man. Like we always get to do during the season, in the off season. There's never a bad time. Real quick, tell people where they can find you.
They can find all of my videos and podcasts on youtube.com / Davis _Mattek. And then all of my fantasy football stuff, all the premium stuff, waiver wires, rankings, rest of season rankings, all DFS, all that stuff, patreon.com / Davis Mattek. So if you do YouTube search, Google search, you're gonna get led right there. In fact, probably one of my videos will be one of the suggested algorithm videos if you're watching this on YouTube. It's funny how that works.
It's great, and you still have all of your youthful glow and energy, but you've been doing this for a long time now. We've been doing this together for a long
Long
time,
time, buddy. Yeah.
and it's because of these great people. We want to serve them because they give us the pleasure and privilege to serve, and we want to serve them because they're so classy.